This science fiction short story is 2BR02B by Kurt Vonnegut, Jr. It was published by Wheels of If Science Fiction magazine on January 1962. The story happens in United States without poverty, cripples, prisons, and wars. All diseases are cured, and so are aging. Since everyone has indefinite lifespans, population has to be tightly controlled. Federal Bureau of Termination, a department responsible for terminating lives of volunteers, is set up for population control. According to the law, if babies have to be born, someone has to volunteer to die. 2BR02B is the telephone number of the municipal gas chambers of the Federal Bureau. The protagonist, Wei-Hing, is originally a happy father-to-be. Until X-rays reveal his wife is going to have triplets. If the triplets are to survive, 3 volunteers are required. At the moment, Dr. Hitz, the one who sets up the very first gas chamber, comes to see the triplets and meet Wei-Hing and Leona Duncan, the person in charge of the Service Division of the Federal Bureau. In the conversation, Wei-Hing shows his doubt on population control, since the law is brutal to deprive one's right to live and to reproduce. Then Dr. Hitz reminds Wei-Hing of the old days when there is insufficient drinking water and food due to a total population of 20 billion. He emphasizes that, whichever one of the triplets Wei-Hing chooses, he or she will live on a happy, roomy, clean, rich planet, thanks to population control. Out of desperation, Wei-Hing takes out a revolver and shoots Dr. Hitz and Leona Duncan. He finally kills himself to make room for all 3 of the triplets. In terms of human nature, Wei-Hing is driven by the id for the desire for survival of his babies, as he shows a strong tendency to build a family with next generations. However, his actions are determined by the law. In terms of human relations, the protagonist is a father. Due to overpopulation and lack of natural resources in the past, a law is set up to restrict the protagonist's free will to have newborn babies. Regarding human development, David Hume believes desire, rather than reason, determines human behavior. Driven by the desire for the survival of the triplets, Wei-Hing overcomes the law by shooting 2 authorities and himself dead in order to make room for the triplets. His action obeys Hume's ideas versus reason's theory. About the writing, this is an immortality-themed story about individuals with indefinite lifespans. It has a 3-act structure. In the first act, the setup and the incident is when Wei-Hing waits for his wife to give birth. The turning point is when Wei-Hing knows that he is going to have triplets, which means he needs 3 volunteers. The second act is the confrontation. The situation gets worse when Wei-Hing has only 1 volunteer, who is his maternal grandfather. He starts to doubt on the law and confront Dr. Hitz. The third act is the resolution. The climax pops up when Wei-Hing takes out a revolver to shoot himself and 2 people dead. The reward is all 3 of his babies can survive. The narration is third-person narrator. The narrator describes the actions and thoughts of the protagonist. Wei-Hing is an everyman character, dreaming of building an intact family like all other men do. The reader can easily put themselves into his shoes and feel the tension of the protagonist when Wei-Hing cannot find 3 volunteers and has to sacrifice his maternal grandfather. The setting is in the far future in the United States. The setting poses constraints to Wei-Hing's free will to have children due to population control. Wei-Hing's actions must strictly abide by the law. Technology in the far future is very high. The setting is just like a utopia without poverty, wars, and diseases. Regarding the literary style, there is a metaphor in the story. The mural of the hospital is a portrait of a very neat garden, which actually depicts USA in the far future under population control. The fallen leaves being raked represent the old sick volunteers, while the trash burners represent the gas chambers. The story is utterly worth reading, as it nicely balances description, thoughts, feelings, and speech. To read or not to read this story, my answer is a definite yes.